is so difficult because you never get to talk to anybody.
Yeah, that's right. I'm with you. Hey, thank you very much. Thanks, Angus.
No worries.
Angus Kidman from Sydney, and my thanks to Caroline Daly. Thank you, Caroline.
Thanks, Karen.
And to Chester Borrows.
Yes, always privileged. Thank you.
We're coming up to 5 o'clock, and Lisa Owen is next with Checkpoint. Back tomorrow. Good afternoon.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irarangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Haere nei, a COVID-positive man skips out of an Auckland MIQ and is missing for hours. So where did he go and who is at risk? 49 new Delta cases today and the number of people in hospital has jumped to 42. The youngest person in intensive care is just 18 years old. The Associate Health Minister joins us. New rules for families farewelling loved ones during alert level 4 could be kneecapped by vaccination rates. We're in Auckland as the region prepares to join the coveted level 3 club. How many pensioners are collecting super and also getting salaries over 200k? And a whale of a tale. KiwiRail fishes for a train.
Ahiahi Marie, RNZ News at 5, ko Sarah Thompson tōku ingoa. A COVID-19 infected person suspected of escaping from an Auckland quarantine facility only entered the MIQ hotel yesterday evening. The police say they were called just after 10:30 this morning and found the man in the suburb of Otara. He has since been arrested. The COVID-19 Response Minister, Chris Hipkins, says the person was last captured on CCTV at the MIQ hotel at about 1 o'clock this morning. He says they were reported missing by a family member, but it's not yet known when. The man's movements after he left the Ellerslie MIQ facility are also not known.
Anybody leaving an MIQ facility, particularly someone who is infected with COVID-19, is something that is utterly unacceptable.
Chris Hipkins says both he and the Prime Minister were first notified of the escape before 1 o'clock this afternoon. The opposition says there are several questions that urgently need answering by the government. National MP Chris Bishop wants to know why it took about 10 hours for the police to be informed when the MIQ facility knew the man had escaped and why the Prime Minister did not inform the public at her 1 p.m. briefing. He's calling for an urgent investigation and assurances security will be improved. A spokesperson for Jacinda Ardern's office says she didn't mention it at the COVID-19 briefing as it was a live event. Essential workers commuting across Auckland's border will be asked to get regular tests from tomorrow. From midnight, the region will be the only part of the country still under level 4 restrictions after Northland's wastewater testing returned a negative result for COVID-19. Director General of Health Ashley Bloomfield wants people to get tested in the next 3 to 4 days, even if they have no symptoms.
We are looking at how to put in place a system to check that these commuting essential workers are being regularly tested to support our efforts now and in the future.
Dr Bloomfield says they'll also be introducing a system for regular surveillance testing of certain groups of essential workers. He's reminding essential workers not to go to work if they have symptoms or have been at a location of interest. They're being asked to stay home and isolate in their bubble, let their employer know and call Healthline for advice about getting a test. The youngest person in intensive care with coronavirus is 18. There are 49 new cases of COVID-19 in the community today. All are in Auckland, bringing the total number of cases in the outbreak to 725. There are 42 people in hospital and 6 in ICU. Younger people have been more likely to get seriously ill with the Delta variant than previous strains. People in quarantine at Wellington's Grand Mercure Hotel are under less strict rules than people at facilities in Auckland. In Wellington, they're allowed to exercise outside their rooms, but in Auckland, they are not. Health experts have concerns about COVID-19 positive cases being allowed out for daily walks in an underground car park at the Grand Mercure. The Prime Minister told 1 p.m. briefing the quarantine people are not allowed out of their rooms. But at question time, Chris Hipkins clarified that rules are different in Wellington.
The Grand Mercure in Wellington is used as a combined quarantine and isolation facility. Those who are in quarantine have much more stringent requirements around them than those who are in isolation.
The Grand Mercure in Wellington has become a quarantine-only hotel during the current outbreak. Diesel is slowly leaking from the KiwiRail locomotive that fell into Picton harbour yesterday. Harbour Master Luke Grogan says the fuel tank can hold 1,000 litres, but it's not known how much was in the tank at the time. He estimates about 15 litres has been discharged through a fuel breather pipe, which divers are working to block off. The site has been surrounded with spill containment booms. And moving into sports news, swimmer Sophie Pascoe will chase a third gold medal at the Tokyo Paralympics tonight, where she competes in the final of the 100 metres butterfly S9. Pascoe qualified third fastest for the final, which goes just before 8:30 p.m. tonight. The butterfly is her final event in Tokyo. The Silver Ferns face the prospect of being without several players for the upcoming England series should Auckland fail to get out of lockdown in time. New Zealand begins a 3-test series against England in Christchurch on Monday, September 20th. However, with Auckland set to remain in Level 4 until September 14th and regional travel not possible until Level 2, it could mean the Auckland-based Silver Ferns won't be able to get to Christchurch in time. Sports editor Stephen Hewson reports.
3 members of the 17-strong Silver Ferns squad are Auckland-based: shooter Grayson Weki, midcourter Peter Tuava and defender Sulu Fitzpatrick. While the rest of the country's in Level 3 and regional travel is not allowed, that restriction's expected to be lifted in time for the bulk of the squad to head to Christchurch. Netball New Zealand says it's working through possible options with the Ministry of Health for the Auckland players. RNZ understands those options include getting travel exemptions, simply going ahead with the tests without the trio, or delaying the tests until they're available. The England squad will leave quarantine on September the 10th, when they'll be able to train together as a team.
Cristiano Ronaldo has become the all-time leading scorer in men's international football, scoring twice in Portugal's 2-1 World Cup qualifier over Ireland to reach 111 goals. And that's your sport and news.
Crunch time for COVID cases.
I don't want to be too doomy and gloomy, but you need to keep going really hard for another week or two to see if you can get those numbers turned and going down.
Banding together in times of trouble.
They were evacuating a family of 7 people, 2 rabbits and a dog. They had to get them on a rope line across a river.
And keep moving in lockdown.
Sleeping around here in my lounge in front of the iPad, trying to do the move.
Zumba this way. Morning report, weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
Te reo irirangi o Aotearoa, funded through New Zealand On Air. Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight, Rāmere Friday. Northland, Auckland and Coromandel, also Gisborne. Cloudy periods and a few showers, but mainly fine about Auckland City. The remainder of the North Island, also Nelson and Marlborough, fine apart from the odd afternoon and evening shower inland. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, fine and cloudy periods, isolated showers, but mainly tomorrow. For Canterbury, Otago and Southland, mainly fine, but areas of low cloud in Canterbury overnight, also warm tomorrow. And for the Chatham Islands, mainly fine. That concludes the short forecast from Met Service to midnight, Rāmere Friday. It's 7 minutes past 5.
Thanks, Sarah. Tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. A man who's tested positive for COVID-19 has been arrested after escaping from a quarantine facility in Auckland. He was last seen at the Ellerslie facility at 1 this morning and police were alerted just after 10:30am. The man was found 13 kilometres away at a house in Otahuhu early this afternoon. COVID Response Minister Chris Hipkins couldn't say how he got there or how many people may have been exposed to COVID-19.
My understanding is that the person was located by the police at their usual place of residence and has subsequently been removed from that place by the police. As to how they got there or how long they were there for, I don't have that information at this point.
He says a review of CCTV footage from the quarantine centre is underway.
I don't have all of the information yet. I do have information that suggests that there is some CCTV of someone hiding in a bush while a security guard walked past them. So we haven't got confirmed information as to exactly how the person made it out of the facilities, whether it was an area which was single fenced or double fenced. Most of the areas that people who are staying in that facility have access to are double fenced. So the exercise area has a 1.8 metre fence followed by a 2 metre fence, so they would have had to scale 2 fences.
But Mr Hipkins says there will be an investigation to get to the bottom of what happened.
Look, anybody with COVID-19 who's been identified with COVID-19 and transferred to an MIQ facility because of that has been transferred there for a reason. If somebody is deliberately putting others at risk, that's unacceptable. If there has been in any way a lapse in the system that has allowed them to do that, then that is something that I'm concerned about, and we will absolutely be looking at exactly what's happened. A lot of work has gone into making these facilities as secure as possible. If someone has made it out, particularly from a quarantine facility where we extra staff quarantine facilities because we know there's extra risk there, then of course I'm concerned about that.
The Prime Minister was briefed about the alleged escape just before the 1 p.m. update today. A spokesperson says it was a live situation then and the Prime Minister wouldn't talk about it while it was still underway. On the COVID front, there were 49 new cases in the community today, which brings the cluster to 736. And the government's announced Northland will drop down to level 3 from midnight tonight. Our reporter Nita Blake-Person joins us live from Whangarei. Congratulations on level 3, Nita. What was the tipping point to move you guys down from midnight tonight?
Tēnā koe, Lisa, and thank you very much. Yeah, well, we were cooped up a little bit longer, not because we had any COVID cases in Northland, but because they wanted to carry out some wastewater testing just to be very, very certain that it hadn't made it into the community up here. This came after the emergence of those cases in Warkworth, so there were 27 tests done across 26 sites right across the Rohe this week, and they have all come back negative. So it was announced that the Prime Minister felt comfortable to shift us down to level 3 from midnight tonight, along with the rest of the country, bar, of course, Auckland. But this does bring into effect a border between levels between us and Auckland now. So police are ramping up the checkpoints that have been in place for the past week. But I guess now, because there is the difference in the alert levels, they will be a little bit harder, although there should have been no non-essential travel taking place anyway. So those 3 checkpoints that have been in place will be boosted up to 5, just in case anyone is tempted by the freer restrictions and maybe the takeaways of the north. The police will be there to greet them.
Yeah, so how are locals feeling about the change?
Almost everyone I've spoken to is pretty ecstatic about it. I think some people still cautious about lifting those restrictions given Delta's huge transmissibility, but I think for the businesses which are preparing to safely open tomorrow, and most I've spoken to are the food outlets, they're really pleased. Also pleased are the customers, many of whom are pretty sick of their own cooking at this point. So I come to you tonight from Bank Street in Whangarei, which is a bit of a golden mile for takeaways. There's all the big chain ones, but also some locals, and it's really busy here tonight as people prepare for possibly an influx of business tomorrow. I was round the corner at the nearby Lone Star before, and they're gearing up to do about 100 kilograms of ribs tomorrow, and I would imagine there will be some very hungry customers right across this area from first thing tomorrow.
It did not escape us, Nita, that you're just up the road from all those takeaway joints. I'm wondering if you're going to set up your tent, be the first in queue, and what will you be after?
I couldn't say if I'll be here first thing tomorrow, but I have been planning some orders. I think I'll probably try and keep it local, but I have been dreaming of fish and chips for some time, so I will be among those people hitting up the takeaway joints tomorrow.
Good luck, Nita. That is Nita Blake-Person joining us live from Whangarei. It is almost 13 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Kia ora rawatu mo te whakarongo mai e Hariaki nei. Coming up on the program, the Associate Minister of Health on the man with COVID who escaped quarantine and the growing number of people in hospital with Delta. More than 100 nurses and doctors from around the country are on standby to help out in Auckland as the Delta outbreak continues to pile the pressure on the region's hospitals. However, clinicians are warning it may mean patients in other regions get bumped off surgical lists unless nationwide workforce shortages are fixed. Ruth Hill reports.
Cancer specialist Kate Gregory is in regular contact with colleagues overseas whose patients are missing out on treatment as hospitals overflow with Delta patients.
For those patients who are affected, it's a frightening anyway to have a cancer diagnosis and be waiting for treatment, but then to have that treatment postponed or delayed and not to know when it's actually going to occur, is really, really hard for people.
Dr. Gregory, who is also co-medical director for the Cancer Society, says sending critical care nurses and other staff to Auckland is going to have a flow-on effect for other centres.
I think it's really difficult, and I think, people will absolutely try as much as possible that, that those essential services, that the cancer surgeries can still get done. But, there are pressures coming, which might mean that that's more difficult.
Today there are 42 COVID patients in hospital, all in Auckland. Director General of Health, Dr. Ashley Bloomfield, says 6 patients are in intensive care, including 3 on ventilators.
I do know that the youngest person in ICU was 18, and what I would say is all are stable, but anyone who is ventilated in ICU might be stable but quite unwell, and so that's an indication that, again, this is not a trivial infection, that some people are very unwell in our ICUs.
Middlemore Hospital intensive care specialist Rob Bevan says while urgent surgery for cancer and heart patients is continuing, the hospital has had to scale back on some of the work it would normally do to create capacity. He says if intensive care units become too full, health boards could divert nurses from other areas.
But as we spread those teams thinner, it's possible that the outcomes, the percentage of patients that we're able to get through this, would inevitably deteriorate. So that is why we are so focused on providing the best care under the best models.
Nurses Organisation spokesperson Kate Weston says there are nearly 100 vacancies for ICU nurses outside Auckland, and it was a problem before the pandemic hit.
There's still, unfortunately, other things that get people into intensive care units, whether it be trauma or whether it be due to surgery or serious medical events. So that's always going to be a real pressure, particularly when you've got gaps and understaffing anyway.
Kate Weston says delaying elective surgery has big flow-on effects for patients.
That is a real concern because no one wants people to suffer unnecessarily, and what we did see last time was that people, once they did get to healthcare and felt confident and safe to present for healthcare, were much more unwell than if they had presented earlier.
Oncologist Kate Gregory says cancer patients who are worried about new symptoms or others who find lumps or experience unexpected bleeding should not hold back from getting a medical opinion, whatever the alert level.
It's really important that people seek help. It's still there, and that we don't, because one of the things that we're concerned about obviously is delays in diagnosis or people getting help when they need it.
According to Bowel Cancer New Zealand, it took almost a year to clear the backlog of investigations, such as colonoscopies, and treatments that were not done due to the last nationwide lockdown. Clinicians agree the ultimate solution to keeping the health system functioning is the current lockdown measures and vaccinating as many people as quickly as we can.
There's fear low vaccination rates among funeral directors could stop grieving families viewing the body of their loved ones, despite strict COVID rules being loosened. At alert level 4, funerals in Tangihanga are banned, with bereaved families forced to wait to say their farewells or in some cases have a virtual service. But the Director General of Health signed off on new rules allowing whānau from the same bubble to view their loved one under strict conditions. Chief Executive of the Funeral Directors Association, David Moja, joins me now. Good evening, David. Let's start with the good news. What are the new rules allow?
Yes, good evening, Lisa. The good news is that under alert level 4, so that's for the whole of Auckland, viewings are now allowed. There are some conditions around them. So, for example, the family must wear masks inside the funeral home. Clearly, they mustn't have any symptoms of COVID-19 or be waiting for a test. And there are some limitations in the way in which funeral directors can hold those viewings. But as you mentioned, the piece that's exercising us at the moment is the requirement for the funeral director to be fully vaccinated.
Because what? The funeral director has to be in the room with the family while the viewing takes place?
Often that can be the case, but the immediate concern is for the potential safety of the staff involved, because the viewings are held in a single room, and that room will be inside the funeral home. So the funeral director will need to accompany the family and may well need to be there to supervise the family. But that is one of the aspects that we're currently in discussion with, because we do only have quite a limited number of funeral directors who are fully vaccinated.
Yeah, tell me about that, David. Why is that the case? And did you ask to be vaccinated as essential workers?
Yes, we did. We initially engaged with government back in March to say that as funeral directors, we wanted to be at the front of the queue because of the various exposures that we have, and also because actually the number of funeral directors across the country is quite limited. However, we were denied at that point. And so the only way that funeral directors since then have been able to access the vaccine is as and when the general population have been allowed to. So we weren't in level 1, but we were arguing we should have been in level 2, group 2. But that, because we couldn't achieve that, we've been left as part of the general population. But we are now engaged very actively with the Ministry of Health, and we are providing them with data for the number of funeral directors who either have had no dose or only one dose.
Do you know those numbers, David?
Yes, I can give you those. Across Auckland, for example, we have the latest numbers I had at just about 2:30 this afternoon. Is that we've got 40 staff that's been reported to us have got no vaccination, and 45 staff have only got one dose and are waiting for their second one. Across 42 members that we have surveyed just this morning, more than half of the staff have had no vaccination.
So, David, you potentially face a situation where these rules have been relaxed to show some compassion for families, but it may be impossible to accommodate that given you don't have sufficient numbers of fully vaccinated staff, which is one of the criteria.
Yes, that's right. And we are working very hard on that. As I say, I'm expecting confirmation back from the ministry that we will be given priority as an essential service, and that will enable staff to start getting those first doses and hopefully top up with the second dose. But we're already getting reports from our members who are being creative around the country. One of our members has no vaccinated staff at all, and so they have brought someone in who is fully vaccinated and trained them in the process that's necessary to ensure that families can come and do viewing safely. So that's the sort of response that we're seeing around the country, because we really, really want to be able to ensure that families in Auckland do get the chance for that meaningful farewell. It is such a critical part of the grieving process.
Absolutely, David, and it's a terribly tough time for everyone with a death at alert level 4. Appreciate your time this evening. That is David Moja, who is the Chief Executive of the Funeral Directors Association. Homai o whakaro, we would love your feedback. Nō reira anei na kaupapa mō te hōtaka nei. Let us know what you think about those rules being relaxed. That is, families will be now able to view the bodies of their loved ones at alert level 4. Also today, we've learnt that a COVID positive case has escaped from MIQ. Pātui mai, send us your thoughts, text me your thoughts on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. A salvage effort is underway in Picton harbour for a runaway locomotive and wagon that have tipped into the water. Kiwi Rail says it wasn't being loaded onto a ship at the time. It weighs about 50 tonne and is sitting 8 metres below the surface of the water. Our reporter Samantha G joins us live from Picton harbour. Hi Samantha, what's been going on there today?
Kia ora, Lisa. So behind me here in Picton is the scene where the locomotive entered the water. As you said, sitting close to the seafloor, so Kiwi Rail, Port Marlborough and the harbour master have been working today to try and ascertain how they're going to get this thing off the ground or off the seafloor. Divers have been in today off a barge to assess what it looks like under the water, and they'll be attaching float bags in the next or tomorrow, hopefully, in order to get this locomotive floated and out of the sea. I spoke with the harbour master Luke Grogan earlier.
So divers have been down and they've managed to get a good sense of where things are at, and then working with the various personnel with expertise, so crane operations, barge operations, engineers, etc. And as I say, Kiwi Rail's been working hard to coordinate a plan for retrieving the locomotive and the rail wagon. So it's a heavy piece of kit, and so the strategy is to use some flotation bags, which help to bring it to the surface, and then essentially use a barge transport to manoeuvre it into position to be lifted out with some cranes.
Okay, so that's the harbour master. It sounds pretty complicated. Have they given any indication of how long it might take?
Well, the harbour master has said they are hoping they can get into that work tomorrow with the view to get the locomotive lifted out of the water by the end of the day and have it on the shore. So all going well, divers in tomorrow, attach the flotation bags, and then at some point have it in a position so they can crane it out of the sea.
Thanks, Samantha. That is Samantha G joining us live from Picton Harbour, where that locomotive runaway train is, well, almost at the bottom of the harbour. Northland joins the coveted Level 3 club from 11:59 tonight after 27 wastewater samples taken from across the region came up clear of COVID. That means Auckland will be completely cut off from the rest of the country, with roadblocks to the north and south as it stays in Level 4. The Far North Mayor has been calling for a bypass for those needing safe passage past the super city and into other Level 3 areas. And John Carter joins me now. John, are you happy to have Auckland off your back?
Oh, look, we're absolutely delighted to be de-linked from Auckland and for us to stand on our own and join the rest of New Zealand. So we're very grateful for that decision, and the people up here, quite honestly, are relieved.
So have you had any response to your request for this, so-called safe passage, a bypass past the super city?
So, Lisa, yes, we have. I've got to say, we've been working with officials in the Prime Minister's office and others here in Northland, and with the other mayors and the chair of the region. And I've got to say that we've had a very good positive feedback. So we're looking to take the boundary down to the southern boundary of the Kaipara, which is Tihana, and then have a safe route through from Tihana to Bombay and Viki, of course, so that people from south can come north and Northland people can go south. And I've got to say, I'll be surprised if that isn't in place. It already is in place, of course, for our essential workers and for our supplies. And so talking with our representatives and with our police, etc., I'm pretty confident that they can put that in place for us. They're working hard on it. Thank them very much. I think we're going to get there.
So the thing is, John, it's not just people coming out of your region. People are going to be coming into your region from Level 4, right, down to Level 3, whether it be because of freight or they're essential workers. I mean, how do you feel about that from a safety point of view?
So the two things there. So the people I've just been talking about are people who are in Level 3 from Waikato, Hamilton and further south coming through. So they're on the same level as we are, and of course it'll be Level 2 before they can come through. But of the essential workers that come through and deliver our goods for us and do work in Auckland or Viki, they're tested regularly, and we are being very cautious to make sure that all those people are appropriately tested. We're taking great care to make sure that we don't have any spillage, so to speak. I'm confident that we have that well in hand.
So, John, the thing is going to be, If and when you guys go to 2, right? You guys go to level 2 and Auckland may be at a higher level. So Auckland could be stuck, right? Not able to travel. But we're potentially going to be coming up to the school holidays shortly, and I'm sure you'll be wanting to get your hands on travellers and money into the economy and all the rest of it. Hey, have you thought about how you're going to navigate that? If everything south of Auckland goes to 2 and you're in 2 and you want holiday makers, are you looking at more flights, or how are you going to manage this?
Well, that's what I say. What we are managing is the safe route from Bombay through to Tihana.
So you still want them to do a roadie?
They'll still, I mean, if that's your choice, there's an ability, of course, for people to fly into Auckland and fly onto Kirikiri or Whangarei or Kaitaia, so they can do that by flights. But if they wish to drive, then we are arranging for a safe passage to ensure that they get from one side of the Auckland to the other, either way, and make sure that it's well done, it's safely for everybody involved. I'm confident we can do that.
John, everybody loves to hate a Jaffa, right? But at the same time, they bring precious dollars into the community. So with Auckland, with basically an electric fence around it, what does that mean for your tourism economy?
Well, again, it's just part of the price that we pay because of COVID. We obviously enjoy having Aucklanders come and visit us. They're our nearest neighbours. But in these circumstances, of course, they know they can't come. We understand that, and we will be looking to ensure that we get other people from other areas so that our tourism businesses, our business, our economy, all the people who we need to have employed get that opportunity. Of course, we will also be working as best as we can with the officials in Auckland to help them do whatever we need to get rid of this blasted COVID.
Appreciate your time, John. That is Far North Mayor John Carter. Kia ora e te iwi e haere nei I checkpoint. Fears students from lower decile schools will give up on learning as lockdown continues. How many pensioners do you reckon are earning over 200k and are still collecting super payments? Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program tonight. Get in touch via text 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can flick us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time for the headlines now. Anea Sarah Mina Pita Pita Kōrero.
Kia ora, Lisa. RNZ News headlines. Ko Sarah Thompson tōko ingoa. Police have charged a man with failing to comply with public health orders after he escaped from an Auckland quarantine facility. The COVID-positive person only entered the hotel yesterday evening and was last seen on CCTV at the hotel at 1 a.m. His family reported him missing and the police later arrested him in Otara. COVID-19 Response Minister Chris Hipkins says he and the Prime Minister first heard about the escapee before 1 o'clock this afternoon. National MP Chris Bishop says the government needs to answer some serious questions. He asks why it took about 10 hours for the police to be told and why the Prime Minister did not tell the public at her 1 p.m. COVID-19 update. Essential workers commuting across Auckland's border are being asked to get regular tests from tomorrow, even if they have no symptoms. From midnight, the region will be the only part of the country still under Level 4 restrictions after Northland enters Level 3. Director General of Health Ashley Bloomfield says they are introducing a regular surveillance testing system for certain groups of essential workers. People in quarantine at Wellington's Grand Mercure Hotel are under less strict rules than those in Auckland. They can exercise outside their rooms in the capital's quarantine facility, and health experts are worried about them going for daily walks in the hotel's underground car park. There are 49 new cases of COVID-19 in the community today. All are in Auckland, bringing the total number of cases in the outbreak to 725. There are 42 people in hospital and 6 in ICU, with the youngest there aged 18. Younger people have been more likely to become seriously ill with the Delta strain than previous strains. And finally, diesel is slowly leaking from the Kiwi Rail locomotive that fell into Picton harbour yesterday. Harbour Master Luke Grogan says the fuel tank can hold 1,000 litres, but it's not known how much was in the tank at the time. The site has been surrounded with spill containment booms. Those are your headlines. Our next news and sport update is at 6.
Thanks, Sarah. No mai hoki mai. If you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint. Ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Ko taku hoa I nai nei, ko Nona Peltier, who joins us to talk business. OK, Nona, let's start with the Maritime Union. It says it's important that the country's 2 fuel tanker ships are retained to ensure energy security. Now, this is when the Marsden Point refinery closes. So what is the concern here?
Yeah, the concern is basically that the shipping company, the Coastal Oil Logistics Company, is unsure about its future when the Marsden Point refinery converts to becoming an importer of bulk fuels, which will entail ships arriving and then dropping off the fuel. So the question is, do you need a secondary service to then support the transport of fuels to the various ports around New Zealand that are currently getting their fuel supply from Coastal Oil Logistics? Now, that company is a joint venture of the major petroleum suppliers BP Oil, Mobil Oil, and Z Energy. Their future is unknown. The company is still not sure what its role will be in the new lineup. So, yeah, a few questions there. I mean, for example, some of the fuels that they carry to the ports certainly would include jet fuel, which is an important one, obviously, automotive gas oil, that's diesel, as well as the regular petroleum, 91 octane, 95 octane, bunker fuel, bitumen, and, they supply. Really, the supply chain goes from commercial markets, industrial markets, and of course retail markets. So big questions to be answered, and no one knows what those answers are yet.
And in the News You Can Use department, Nona, businesses are being reminded that there are some important deadlines coming up if they want to claim the wage subsidy. So what do they need to know?
Yeah, well, the first deadline comes up tonight. That's for the first tranche of wage subsidies that businesses could claim for the first 2 weeks of the lockdown period. And then that closes. So if you don't get your application in tonight, you don't get to necessarily claim for that. So then the second tranche opens tomorrow. That's for the next 2 weeks. And so you have, again, 2 weeks to claim over that period and so forth for as long as this goes on. Now, it's not that hard. Apparently, you can just fill out an application form on the Ministry of Social Development website. I spoke with the Employers and Manufacturers Association earlier today, and they said, look, it's important that people just get in and apply. And, the details, if you don't have it all, I guess, it's better to get your application in and get it started than to have it, right down perfectly. So if you're a little bit worried, just get your application in and then, I guess, worry about the details later, huh?
Hey, Nona, shall we take a quick trot around the markets?
Yes. Now, look, Asian markets were in a cautious mood today, and that was because of some concern over the Chinese economy and some soft data. And also with the U.S. payrolls report that's coming out later this week, there's a lot of concern about the U.S. dollar and the value there in terms of interest rates and so on. So against that backdrop, our top 50 index, it rose more than 0.25%. Up 37 points to 13,280. And the dollar is steady at 70.6 US cents, 95.9 Australian, and 51.3 pence.
Thanks, Nona. Ka kite. That's Nona Peltier with Business News. An investigation is underway after a COVID-positive man escaped from an Auckland quarantine facility and travelled more than 12 kilometres across town. There are 49 new COVID cases in the community today, bringing the cluster total to 736. The number of people in hospital has jumped to 42. And the government plans to introduce a testing regime for people crossing borders into different alert levels as Northland heads to level 3 tonight. Associate Health Minister Dr. Ayesha Verrall explains what happened with the infected escapee.
A really serious event. He escaped in the early hours of the morning. The police were called out to find him in the morning, and they apprehended him later on today.
In a house, is that right, Minister?
That is my understanding, but that's second hand.
So how much of a risk is this, and where has this person been over what is a number of hours?
Yeah, those are really important questions, and that's precisely what our public health authorities are working through with the man who is currently in police custody now. All his movements need to be traced so that we can identify if there have been any contacts and make sure we follow up then. I think the important thing for the public to know is that he left MIQ into a level 4 environment, so the opportunities for random mixing with the public would have been low, but nonetheless it needs to be contact traced and all the public health actions that flow on from that taken.
Did he just walk out the front door?
Absolutely not. You cannot do that from an MIQ environment. MIQ is staffed, the entrances and exits are monitored. There is a patrol outside MIQ and 2 2-metre fences. So it has to be quite deliberate effort to get out of an MIQ facility.
Any indications around how exactly he did get out?
No, and I wouldn't want to speculate. This man will be before the court tomorrow morning.
Did he make more than one attempt to leave the property?
I don't believe so.
Okay. So how do you care for this person now and keep them isolated?
Yeah, so he's in police custody now and they'll need to find a suitable arrangement. I've also said that he's with the public health. The public health officials are attending to him while he's in police custody and making sure part of their job will be supervising his isolation arrangements so that the setup is safe for staff and any others who are in custody as well.
So can you confirm that he will not be returning to hotel quarantine?
Clearly he's going before a judge tomorrow, and so I imagine that will be where his future direction is determined.
How did you know that he was missing?
So just remembering that I'm not the Minister for MIQ, I believe Minister Hitkins was informed earlier in the day.
Right, but do you know who reported him missing and whether staff at the facility noticed he'd gone?
No, and indeed that will be precisely the sort of information that we'll need to find in an investigation of this event. It is not an event we want to see happening, and we need to find out how it happened so that it doesn't happen again.
Minister, do you know if he was infectious?
He is a COVID case, so we presume all COVID cases are infectious.
And is there any indication at this stage of how many people he may have come in contact with?
No, that contact tracing exercise interview will be done by by Auckland Regional Public Health Authorities.
All right, let's move on to alert levels. Northland is moving into alert level 3 tonight, and basically that puts Auckland as this bit of an island in the country with borders blocked off north and south. But there are thousands, tens of thousands of people going in and out of Auckland daily, essential workers or with exemptions. What plans are there for testing that significant chunk of people?
That's right. You would have heard Dr. Bloomfield note this issue today at the 1 p.m. stand-up, that we are concerned about making sure that transit across that border is very safe. We are exploring options of how to implement testing for those who cross the border. We don't have a requirement for that yet, but that is the direction of work that's rapidly underway.
What would you like to see, Minister? A percentage of that population sample tested?
Look, I think the main thing to work through is the feasibility of implementation, because of course we want for people who do need to get through to be able to cross across the border, but with the assurance that they don't have COVID. So the precise structure of that is what we need to work out.
Can you give us any clues as to what that may look like, whether you'll be working with employers or whether it will be tests randomly done at checkpoints?
Both of those options are being looked at.
And in the meantime, what are your expectations of these people in terms of them getting tests?
Yeah, so all workers, whether they're moving across the border or not, so all of people who are currently working, all essential workers, need to monitor themselves for symptoms. If they have symptoms, they must get a test and call in sick for work. And we encourage workers who are crossing the level 3 to 4 boundary for their work can also get tested now, but we'll be formalising a process for that in the coming days.
There are 42 people in hospital now. What can you tell us about them in terms of their age and their health status?
So their health status, you'll know that we have 6 in ICU currently, and a total of 3 requiring ventilation. They're spread across Auckland metropolitan hospitals. In terms of their age, if I just do some quick maths here, we've got 13 over 60.
And you have some young people in there too, Minister?
Yeah, that's right. So we've got one person in their teens, and then between the age of 30 and 40, we've got 8, 40 to 60, 20.
What is modelling telling you about when hospitalisations will peak?
Yeah, so hospitalisations usually... So Lisa, just to answer your question directly, I haven't seen modelling on hospitalisations, but we know that they will peak. They tend to peak a week or 2 after cases do, and that's just because of the course that COVID follows. People are often only mildly ill, and then if they're going to become more severely ill, that happens a week or 2 later.
And that is Associate Health Minister Dr Ayesha Verrall. It is an almost 5:45. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. He muriaki ina pita pita kōrero. After the news at 6, Grant Robertson puts the Greyhound racing industry on notice. He joins us live. The number of pensioners getting super payments while on salaries of more than $200,000 has more than tripled over the past decade. Superannuitants are the largest group of beneficiaries in the country, and as the annual super bill rises, so too do the number of high-earning recipients. Nita Blake-Person reports.
Superannuation is New Zealand's universal pension payment. You can get it if you do or don't work, and there are no income or asset tests either. And while many tout that as a huge part of its success, it does mean the number of very well-paid people receiving it is rising. In 2010, there were 2,209 people who were being paid more than $200,000 a year receiving super. Fast forward to 2020, that number has jumped to 7,860. That's a 255% increase.
If people have got an awful lot of independent money, should they also be eligible for the super? And it's a good policy question.
That's the Retirement Commissioner Jane Wrightson. She says the current system is easy and flat and universally applied, which has huge benefits.
In effect, we don't have pension poverty in this country. We do have child poverty. We don't have pension poverty. Why don't we have pension poverty? Because we have a good retirement income system. It's a modest one, but a good one. I think there indeed could be lessons to learn about how it's administered and whether the current systems for different types of welfare benefits have just become too cumbersome.
Wrightson says the only way to change the system is to introduce means testing, something that's been roundly rejected in the past.
Is it a huge problem for the country? No. I can see that it would raise equity questions, but there isn't an easy way to resolve it unless you penalise people for providing for their own retirement as well as expecting super.
Janessa Jerram is a public policy researcher and has worked a lot on the NZ Super setup. She says the rising number of high earners getting super is a strength of the system because it doesn't disincentivise people to stay and work.
I think about what NZ Super will look like when, say, I reach retirement, and I imagine there will be a lot of people working at older age groups just because we've taken a longer time to buy our first homes. We're going to be taking a longer time to pay off those mortgages. And again, I think it's just a matter of timing. It's not how much we're earning, it's how much we're earning while reaching the pension age.
While Jerram says there is generally an expectation that NZ Super should provide a more comfortable level of living than that of beneficiaries, they should both be treated equally. She argues there are small changes that can be made to lower the cost of super, including raising the age of eligibility so it's more in line with older people's working patterns.
At the moment, NZ Super is indexed to both wages and inflation. In the future, governments may want to consider only indexing NZ Super to inflation just because it does contain the costs and it leaves more money to go around for other needy groups.
But raising the super age could cause more problems. As it stands, only 5.6% of super recipients are Māori and 2.6% are Pacifica. Jane Wrightson says there tends to be one group which does particularly well out of super.
When you look at women and Māori and Pacifica, all of whom arrive at pension age materially worse off, generally speaking, than others, then the observations that say we need to put the age up get thrown back into sharp relief. In effect, older Pākehā men do best out of this system.
Economist and co-director of Massey University's Māori Business Unit Te Au Rangahau, Dr Matthew Roskridge, says while we should be striving to pay everyone the pension they were told they'd receive, that comes at a cost.
We have to accept that comes at a trade-off from being able to give free client schools, being able to build or give people access to housing, education, health, and maybe superannuates on high incomes need to be maybe increased taxes, some other way of reducing that burden so that we can reallocate the funds to where they're needed more.
For inequality researcher Max Rashbrook, it's all about keeping our welfare system fair.
The pensioners get this benefit from the government universally and without any questions asked, whereas beneficiaries are made to jump through the most appalling range of hoops, face incredibly, intrusive and stigmatising questions, and generally are treated extremely poorly by the system. And so I would like us to take this data as an opportunity to think about, not about how we could treat pensioners worse, but about how we could treat other beneficiaries better.
He wants to see a more level playing field for those getting income from the state, regardless of their age or situation.
There are growing fears students at low decile schools will fall behind or even give up on studies altogether if lockdown drags on. Many are juggling essential work, waiting on devices and looking after family in large bubbles not set up for the classroom. Louise Tanuth reports on the impact of COVID-19 in schools.
We all need our teachers' face-to-face support at this time, but maybe we can't get it. It's taking a toll.
Te Rongopai McNaught is head girl at James Cook High School in Manurewa. It's a Decile 1 school. Studying from home isn't easy for many. While some of them took home school laptops, others are still waiting to get online.
They did push for all the seniors to get one, but some didn't, and then there's also some new students who did come in between that time, so they haven't received one if they haven't asked for one.
Her parents are looking after an elderly friend who joined their bubble, which means cooking and cleaning falls on her and her younger sister, disrupting learning. And for some of her peers working in essential jobs is taking its toll.
My classmates do work in the supermarket. I work in retail, but at the moment my job isn't classed as essential, so I do get money coming through. But for them, I know it's hard, and I know that attending the online classes is hard for them as well.
Principal Grant McMillan puts that down to the financial strain of multiple lockdowns on families.
Particularly as retail's got, 3,000 people in isolation right now that ordinarily be working. So I know, and talking to other principals as well, we've got large numbers of young people now actually earning as essential workers right now. And I think the cumulative effect of this being our third lockdown in Auckland for the year so far, people are slightly more, they're probably feeling that more than they have in the past.
He's in the middle of putting together paper packs for students. 34,000 pieces of paper were printed last week. That's because some students don't have a device or internet, need to share a device, or are in a large family bubble for lockdown at new addresses. But he's most concerned about students coming back to school when alert levels allow it. After last lockdown's experience, he's worried.
The last quarter of students took several weeks to actually come back in. Our community are incredibly vigilant. The experience of measles in 2019, with that outbreak then, really had a major effect in our community when they saw the effect it had in Samoa. There is a hyper-vigilance around not wanting to rush back too early, making sure that everybody is well, especially when you've got large families or you've got, elderly people in the home as well.
Principal Greg Pearce at Orewa College echoed his concern last lockdown. But after moving to Decile 2 Aorere College to Decile 9 Orewa College, he says it's a different world this time.
95% of students at Orewa College do have their own device for learning, which they either bring to school or have access to when they go home. Whereas at Aorere College, well over 50% of the students, particularly in the senior school, didn't have their own device for learning.
And with plans for Year 13s in particular up in the air, he says it's having a huge effect on their mental health.
It just sows a few more seeds of doubt and confusion. Those unanswerables they gather in a young person's mind and just makes them less confident of making clear decisions about their future, I guess.
With a decision on alert levels to be made in less than 2 weeks, students are waiting anxiously.
Like, it just goes through my head, like, what am I supposed to do? What am I doing? What am I doing? Not seeing my friends and not being able just to go out seems like a lot for me.
As people flood into vaccine centres each day to get their shots, a small group are unable to get the Pfizer vaccine. They're not conspiracy theorists, they're not anti-vaxxers, they just need an alternative to Pfizer. Timothy Brown has more.
Emma is a frontline healthcare worker and immunocompromised. She is particularly worried about the Delta variant of COVID-19 and her potential exposure at work. But her first dose of the Pfizer vaccine sent her to the hospital.
I had the dose, within 5 minutes broke out in hives. I went home after about half an hour or so, but then as soon as I got home my throat started swelling and had to go to hospital. I had at least 2 EpiPens and high doses of steroids and antihistamines, like enough to knock people out, and then having to stay overnight in hospital.
As a result of the anaphylactic reaction, she's been told not to get a second dose, leaving her vulnerable to the virus. Studies show between 2 to 11 cases of anaphylaxis per 1 million doses of mRNA vaccine, and unfortunately for Emma, she is one of them.
As part of my role, I'm waltzing in and out of that waiting room, collecting young people to go and meet with them all day, every day. And so as Delta has shown, you can just be in vaguely the same space. You can just be next door to someone and the door's open and you can catch it, right? And so that's a little bit scary.
Alternatives are available and actually approved for use in New Zealand, specifically the Johnson & Johnson and AstraZeneca vaccines. But the government has so far committed to a Pfizer first and Pfizer only strategy. Emma wonders where that will leave her.
If they really care about the people of Aotearoa and getting them vaccinated and really protecting us against COVID-19, that they really, really need to prioritise these alternative vaccine brands.
Professor Graham LeGros, director of the Mulligan Institute, says cases like Emma's demonstrate why the government shouldn't have all its eggs in one basket.
As far as I understand, the government has pre-purchased both AstraZeneca and the Johnson & Johnson. MedSafe have given approval, and there's no reason why they shouldn't be bringing it across either for the emergency or for these cases where it actually may help some people who've got a specialised response to the Pfizer.
Vaccinologist Helen Petousis-Harris, a member of the government's COVID-19 Immunisation Implementation Advisory Group, says other options are being looked at.
We are, in fact, anticipating delivery of an alternative vaccine. So it is very likely that this will be a suitable vaccine option for these few people.
She's talking about the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, or Janssen as it's also known, which got MedSafe approval in early July. The COVID-19 response minister, Chris Hipkins, said at the time Cabinet would decide in August on its use. But that's now changed to September, and Mr Hipkins says the Ministry of Health is also working on plans to distribute it where needed once approved. Deliveries are expected in the last 3 months of the year.
A food directory has been set up to highlight Wellington businesses doing takeaway at COVID-19 Alert Level 3. The At Yours directory is put together by the team behind the popular foodie event Wellington on a Plate, which was interrupted halfway through the lockdown. Our reporter Jake McKee and cameraman Samuel Rillstone have the story.
Level 3 and feeling free, but still with COVID front of mind at this Wainuiamata fish and chip shop. Spiro Miserilakis' Seacraft store is very much open for business in contactless fashion, with a slide set up for orders to whiz from the shop to the customer. Mr Miserilakis says they've been pumping from morning until night, doing about 2 days worth of trade in one.
Yesterday we did approximately, I would say, 200 kilos of potatoes. Wow. Because we obviously make our own chips. We did somewhere in 40 to 45 kilos of fish yesterday.
Tucked away on the secluded Edward Street in the Wellington CBD, Stacey Walsh and her team at Little Bear Quarter are preparing for another busy day of takeaways. So far, it's been a success, with the pub seeing record takeaway sales yesterday, the first day of level 3.
88 burgers sold last night, so yeah, the chefs were pumping it out. It looked in the kitchen like it was just a normal night.
For the second year in a row, Wellington on a Plate got skittled by COVID, but it hasn't stopped foodies. They've just had to become more creative. For the Little Bear Quarter team, the swift move into lockdown meant they were stuck with some of the special ingredients that made up their burger for the event.
Our burger has got a pizza topping, so basically all the staff came in and we all had about, maybe 10 pizza burger buns each to take home, so we all sort of shared how we were eating them all. Lots of people were putting them in toasters and having them breakfast, so I think the birds got a few after maybe day 5.
At level 3, Miss Walsh's team are doing what they know, things like their LBQ and fried chicken burgers, pizzas and mac and cheese. It's a similar story across town at Grace Patisserie, which had been due to transform into a ramen and dessert pop-up restaurant. Owner Mariah Grace says lockdown didn't ruin her plans too much, but it set a challenge for her friend who was going to do the ramen.
Townhouse Ramen that we collaborated with, he had to freeze all his ramen or his stock. He had to stop halfway, but instead he came back at level 3 to do ramen kits. So for us we were okay, but for him he had to kind of think of alternative ways to get income but also use up the stock that we had already made.
Wellington on a Plate organisers have put out an At Yours directory, pointing out the places that are open for takeaway during level 3. Business owners say it's a weight off their chest, so they can focus on the food and not having to get the word out. One is Coco at the Roxy, which won't be starting their take-home kits until Sunday. Head chef Nick Spicer says any support to help bring in customers is a leg up.
Speaking to every chef I know after yesterday's, the first day, and the only complaint was it's just too many people coming out. The support of the local Wellingtonian community is just phenomenal.
So whether Wellingtonians are picking up their food by contactless pickup or dropped at their home door, takeaways in the capital are making their mark and helping businesses get through.
And you'll want to check that story out online for the delicious pictures. On super annuitants and people getting paid when they're making big salaries, over 200k, super is a universal right. It's not a benefit, says Donna. Is it? I think it is a benefit, isn't it? A benefit by definition is a payment made to someone by the state. It's a benefit.
Ahiahi Mārie, RNZ News at 6, ko Sarah Thompson tōku ingoa. The opposition's demanding urgent answers about an escape from quarantine overnight. Police arrested the man who has COVID-19 in Otara in South Auckland earlier this afternoon, but details such as how he escaped and how many people may have been exposed are still not clear. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
The police were called just after 10:30 this morning. The man was found at a house where he usually lived and was arrested. COVID-19 Response Minister Chris Hipkins says he was last seen on CCTV at the MIQ Hotel in Ellerslie about 1 o'clock this morning. He says they were reported missing by a family member who was also in quarantine, but it's not yet known when. Nationals demanding an urgent investigation, including why there was about a 10-hour gap before the police were informed and why the public wasn't told earlier. The spokesperson for the Prime Minister says she didn't mention it at today's briefing as it was still a live, unfolding event.
The police say they have charged a man with failing to comply with public health orders. A leading cancer specialist is warning that if Delta is allowed to overwhelm hospitals in New Zealand, other patients may miss out on treatment. The Health Ministry has confirmed 100 nurses and doctors from around the country are on standby to help out in Auckland, the epicentre of the current outbreak. Nelson oncologist Kate Gregory, who is also co-medical director for the Cancer Society, says that will have a flow-on effect for other regions and services.
I think it's really difficult, and I think, people will absolutely try as much as possible that, that those essential services, that the cancer surgeries can still get done. But, there are pressures coming, which might mean that that's more difficult.
Kate Gregory says overseas experience shows the best line of defence for hospitals is getting the population vaccinated as quickly as possible. A whānau order commissioning agency says more funding will help them meet the needs of many who are struggling. The government has announced $23 million for 3 whānau ora agencies. Whānau Ora North Island Commissioning Agency Chair Merepeka Raukawa-Tate says kai is the most in demand and their providers are the best to get kai to families. She says this extra money will ensure no one is turned away.
We know what's at stake when whānau don't get the support that they need, and that could be in hygiene packs, it could be in navigating other emergency services that they require, or even providing them with kai. So we are trusted. Our whānau order providers are trusted.
A separate $26 million package was announced earlier today to provide more support to Pacific services. Coastal West Aucklanders say restoring roading access should be a priority as 200 people remain cut off from the outside world following severe flooding. Te Henga, Bethel's beach, was swamped with heavy rain on Tuesday. Landslides are blocking parts of Te Henga Road, while parts of Bethel's Road are washed out and impassable by vehicle. Leslie Gardner of the Te Henga Bethel's Beach Emergency Response Group says clearing and fixing the roads should be the number one priority.
Getting the road fixed is absolutely number one. You know, they need to do something temporary probably in the meantime while they figure out what to do, perhaps. Because we can't get in or out at all unless there's an emergency, we are pretty stuck down here.
Leslie Gardner says locals are helping one another get supplies. The Auditor-General says there's nothing wrong with 2 government payments made to gang members. National Party leader Judith Collins and MP Simeon Brown have expressed concern about 2 recent funding decisions. Our reporter Tom Kitchen has more.
Ms Collins asked the Auditor-General if it was appropriate for the government to fund a marae-based meth rehabilitation program that was run by a lifetime member of the mongrel mob. Mr Brown questioned if the Chief Human Rights Commissioner giving a koha at a hui organised by the Waikato mongrel mob Kingdom chapter was the right thing to do. Auditor-General John Ryan says the funding decision for the rehab program was made in line with the right processes. He says the koha is consistent with guidance on expenditure. He doesn't intend to carry out any further work on the matter.
New York has declared a state of emergency after being slammed by torrential rainfall and flash flooding from the remnants of Hurricane Ida. There have been reports of numerous water rescues. Footage on social media shows water pouring into subway stations and people's homes and flooded roads. New Jersey has also declared an emergency and reported at least 1 death. Moving now into sports news, swimmer Sophie Pascoe has recovered from the exhaustion of last night's gold medal win to progress to her 5th final at the Tokyo Paralympics. Pascoe qualified 3rd fastest for the 100-metre butterfly final in the S9 qualification, an event that she is the world record holder in. She'll be the only New Zealander in action at the Tokyo Aquatic Centre tonight as she chases her 5th medal of the Games just before 8:30pm. Para-paddler Scott Martlew won his kayak 200-metre heat to move directly through to tomorrow's final. Coach Bob Carter says a lack of match play shouldn't be an excuse for the White Ferns' first-up loss to England. The New Zealanders were beaten by 46 runs in the cricket T20 opener in Chelmsford, dismissed in the 19th over, chasing 185. Carter says generally his bowlers lacked consistency while the batters failed to build partnerships. While England have had a busy home season, Carter's side haven't played in almost 5 months.
We certainly can say we lack a little bit of match practice, and England have had plenty of all that. But when you're in the heat of battle of an international game, it really doesn't matter. You've got to stand up and to perform. And I felt we showed glimpses. We didn't show enough.
Game 2 of the 3-game series is in Hove on Sunday morning. And finally, severe weather saw dozens of matches postponed at the US Tennis Open today as remnants of Tropical Storm Ida ripped through New York City. New Zealand's Michael Venus and Marcus Daniel, with their respective doubles partners, get their tournament underway in the early hours of tomorrow morning. And that is your news and sport.
Tonight on Nights, our changing world meets the person looking after the tropical rainforest in the middle of Dunedin. Our overseas correspondent Shobha Narayan is on the line from India. Bill Jha seeks out the plausible science behind the sci-fi of Ben 10 and its mutant-making plot driver, Corrodium. And we have our feet firmly grounded for our latest regular guest, podiatrist Emma Worthington, on Nights of me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Te reo irirangi o Aotearoa, on air, online and on demand. Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Rāmere Friday. Northland, Auckland and Coromandel, also Gisborne. Cloudy periods and a few showers, but mainly fine about Auckland City. The remainder of the North Island, also Nelson and Marlborough, fine apart from the odd afternoon and evening shower inland. For Buller, Westland and Fiordland, fine and cloudy periods, isolated showers, but mainly tomorrow. For Canterbury, Otago and Southland, mainly fine, but areas of low cloud in Canterbury tonight, warm tomorrow. And for the Chatham Islands, it'll be mainly fine. That concludes the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Rāmere Friday. It's 7 minutes past 6.
Kia ora rā, e ho no mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. The Greyhound racing industry's on notice over animal welfare and safety in the industry. A government-ordered review concludes the industry's social licence to operate is under challenge. And it's hard to know if earlier recommendations have been adopted due to unnecessary obfuscation by the industry and a lack of access to information on everything from injuries, rehoming of dogs and reasons for euthanasia. The Racing Integrity Board now has until the end of next year, to set performance indicators and lift the industry's game. Joining me now is the Racing Minister, Grant Robertson. Good evening, Minister. What does on notice mean?
Well, it means that those issues that you've just alluded to around transparency, around data collection and around broader animal welfare need to see improvement. Otherwise, the industry is losing its social licence to operate.
So what does that mean? Their business gets canned if they don't pick up their game?
Well, what it says in Sir Bruce's report, I don't think he could put it any better. He runs through those issues and he says if these factors, for any reason, cannot be significantly improved, the industry will cease to have the social licence necessary for its existence. So that's why we're saying that they're on notice, that actually, it's been very difficult to be able to even tell whether or not all of the issues that were raised in the 2017 report have been resolved because of those issues around transparency and data. And obviously we have ongoing animal welfare issues in the industry. So what we're saying is set some very specific indicators for improvement, and if they're not met, then the industry has to seriously be questioning its existence.
Yeah, but you could, in essence, ban it if they don't lift their game and meet the targets. Is that on the table?
Everything's on the table. I do want to make clear that in Sir Bruce's report, he says he does not believe the issues are insurmountable, but unless they are addressed, there is a question around the social licence to exist. So that's why I've given the job to the Racing Integrity Board to set very specific indicators to show whether or not there has been the significant improvement that Sir Bruce is looking for, and I've asked them to come back to us by the end of next year.
Has the industry lied about implementing recommendations around welfare and the other recommendations from the earlier report?
I can't say that, but in part the reason I can't say that is because of the lack of data and the lack of transparency that Sir Bruce raises in his report. So I can't sit here and say yes to that question, Lisa. It's the very reason why we need a lot more clarity around what's happening here.
Okay, so can I put it another way, Minister?
See significant improvements in all of those areas, especially in the animal welfare area.
Okay, so let's flip that question. How would you characterise the industry in terms of how open, cooperative and honest it has been in this process?
Well, in the end, I can only refer back to Sir Bruce's own comments where he talks about them making their job harder by unnecessarily obfuscating information and pushing back against those with an interest. That is clearly not an industry that's stepping forward with the level of transparency that we would expect in an area where there is a great deal of interest in their activities.
In a statement from the Greyhound racing industry, they say we have in no way sought to obfuscate in any aspect. So who do you believe, Greyhound Racing or the report?
Well, Sir Bruce Robertson is a former judge of the Court of Appeal in New Zealand. He's somebody that I appointed to this role because I believe he's a man of immense integrity. I think he's written a very good report, which I would encourage people to read. It makes the point that, as I've already said, the issues aren't necessarily insurmountable, but until we get the level of transparency and clarity, nobody can really answer those questions properly. And so I certainly back Sir Bruce. I think he's produced a good report. It's a very good template for us now to take that work forward, and he will have a role in that as the chair of the Racing Integrity Board.
So why can't Greyhound Racing see that then? Is that arrogance or what?
Well, you'd need to put those questions to Greyhound Racing New Zealand. We've given them a very clear steer. I've written to them with outlining the process from here in those 3 core areas that Sir Bruce has highlighted. They now will have to answer for themselves on those matters.
So have you talked to them, Minister? I mean, what have they said to you?
Oh, look, I've had conversations with Greyhound Racing New Zealand since I became the Minister, and they're clear that they believe they are making improvements. They, I'm sure, would point to examples like the fact that the number of dogs that have been euthanised has decreased significantly, that they have a number of areas where they believe they've made improvements. But from my perspective as the Minister of Racing, there are still too many concerns being raised about animal welfare issues and, as noted by Sir Bruce, a lack of transparency and a lack of good data to make decisions on. So I will keep talking to them. They're very clear on my expectations, and the next job is for the Racing Integrity Board to develop that set of indicators so we can actually all measure whether things that need to change have changed.
But Minister, it's not just that they're unresolved old issues from the previous report. There are a bunch of new issues identified as well. Rehoming of greyhounds is not working. You talk about the lower euthanasia rate, right? This report raises concerns about the fact that some dogs may be being kept alive despite catastrophic injuries in order to have lower euthanasia rates, right? Large-scale breeding, when some of these dogs, close to 200 dogs, don't even make it onto the track, and no accurate records on injuries. If this industry cannot see its failings, how can it possibly improve, and why should it get a second chance?
Well, it's
actually a third chance, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not a matter of a second or a third chance. I've been the Minister in this portfolio since late last year. I've instituted this review. I've put them on notice with a timeline of a year. You asked me a question before, essentially on what they would say, and I've told you that. But from my own perspective, those new issues that you mentioned cause me concern. They will be part, I'm sure, of the Racing Integrity Board's indicators where things need to get better. This is a very clear signal, and I believe the clearest signal that's been given to this industry since, in terms of those other 2 reports. It is either things improve or they lose their social licence to exist.
Minister, if you could take your Greyhound racing jacket off and put your sports cap on. Bulk bookings for sports teams in MIQ going on hold. What's that going to mean for our professional sports players?
Well, it's we're working through the group booking process with the Minister. We obviously have people who have already headed offshore who have bookings that will be fulfilled. But at the moment, all New Zealanders will be well aware that we need more of our MIQ facilities for quarantine while we work our way through this outbreak, and that's the right thing to do.
So there usually is potentially, and there are planned, summer tours involving cricket. So are they going to get spots?
Well, as far as I'll be continuing to talk to Minister Hipkins and the MIQ team about this, but as my understanding of where we are now is that we will fulfil the group bookings, but rightly, Minister Hipkins has asked all of us to go back, and I'm not the only minister involved obviously here, all of us to go back and look at where there have been group bookings to see if they're still needed, are they still required. That's a very responsible approach, but as far as I'm aware, those that have already been agreed and need to happen will continue to happen.
Okay, so ones that are already confirmed will happen, but are you saying that there will be no future group allocations for those professional sports teams from here on in?
No, I'm not saying that at all. What we are doing here is taking another look at all of those group allocations to see where they go. But right now, I think all New Zealanders would understand that we need to get our focus on making sure that we have the quarantine facilities that we need. And going forward from there, we'll be able to take another look.
Thanks, Minister, for joining us. That is the Racing Minister and also Sports Minister, Grant Robertson. Now, Greyhound Racing has released a statement. It says, we share the government's determination to ensure animal care is our priority and our community will continue to focus on the well-being of our dogs. We will work assiduously with the Racing Integrity Board and government to ensure that our processes will deliver on the shared goal of excellence in animal care and transparency of information. It goes on. It does, however, take issue issue with one thing in the minister's statement. It says, "We take issue with one aspect of the minister's statement. We have provided an extensive and full submission and in no way have sought to obfuscate in any aspect of the review or any other information we have been asked to provide. Our submission is available on our website." And that is from the Greyhound Racing New Zealand. The government has announced a $26 million package of support for the Pacific community, which is bearing the brunt of the current Delta outbreak. It's also announced a $23 million boost in funding to whānau ora to be divided between its 3 agencies, including Pacifica Futures. Johnny Blades reports.
The funding comes with immediacy because health officials recognise the fast-moving Delta variant demands an urgent response, especially since the number of Pacific people infected is high, as is the number of Pacific people isolating. The Director of Pacific Health, Geraldine Clifford-Lidstone, says the funding will firstly secure the services of Pacific provider networks in Auckland and Wellington regions, where Pacifica need the most and immediate support.
The second is to support mobile services, ensure that people can get tested in the home and get vaccinated in the home and have their other health issues dealt with. And then the third one is communications to ensure that our communities have access to the information around vaccine, and that needs to be in ethnic-specific languages.
The boost will help maintain momentum in the vaccine rollout and ongoing testing, which the Pacifica Futures Chief Executive Debbie Sorensen says have been met with a great response by the Pacific community.
And the whānau ora money, of course, will support people being able to stay in their bubbles, being able to stay safe and keep their families fed and a roof over their families. We've had an assurance from Te Puni Kokiri that we will have that money in our hands tomorrow.
She says there's no question that until now, Pacific providers generally have been underfunded.
They were not funded with any flexibility to surge, meet a surge demands. And so this will go some way to actually making sure that as a community we're able to respond and support our families over the next fortnight, but also to be looking into the future about what we do next.
Tevita Funaki of Pacific Health and Social Support provider The Whānau welcomes the funding boost. He says the health and social strains from this outbreak will have a significantly longer tail than those the community experienced after lockdowns last year. And with the level of demand for food packages this time around, families need more sustained support.
The welfare support, so there's a welfare support initiative that is supporting especially those that are in isolation. We'll be able to maintain that. We'll be able to do it now because we have the ability to redeploy staff into it. So this will not only help scale it, will help to resource it, but also will help to continue it, at least for the short to medium term.
The Innovation Manager of Pacific Health Disability and Social Services provider Waka Tautua, Bernice Mene, says the boost makes public health sense given what her organisation sees working throughout the country.
And a lot of the feedback is that, the keen for vaccinations, but the access, there's problems with access, and our disabilities community as well. It's being able to get to the vaccination stations, the essential workers or the workers as well.
She says increased support for communication, getting Pacific communities the essential information, is also vital in the pandemic response.
A $23 million funding boost has been announced to support whānau in dire need during the lockdown and the vaccination rollout. Of the $23 million, 8.8 will go straight to the 3 whānau ora agencies. Whānau ora Minister Pene Henare says the remaining money will be held back and distributed as the impact of the lockdown becomes clearer.
A further $14.2 million will be allocated based on need as information on the impact of the current change in alert levels unfolds. This funding will help whānau ora to meet the increased demand for their services and ultimately will help whānau endure these challenging times. Whānau ora is already helping whānau with essential goods such as kai, utilities and connectivity.
Whānau ora says many whānau are experiencing income uncertainty and are unable to pay for power, food and internet, which is a problem with devices for schooling. The Prime Minister was asked why it took another lockdown to invest money into agencies that have been calling for more resources for a diverse range of needs for whānau Māori.
No, absolutely not.
we had increased whānau order funding before we had the tragedy of COVID-19 as a pandemic affecting our Māori and Pacific communities. So absolutely not. But what we also recognise is the additional impact that this pandemic is having on those communities.
Chair of the North Island Commissioning Agency, Meripeka Raukawa-Tate, says it's their organisations that know how to reach those who are most vulnerable. She says this extra money will ensure no one is turned away.
We know what's at stake when whānau don't get the support that they need, and that could be in hygiene packs, it could be in navigating other emergency services that they require, or even providing them with kai. So we are trusted. Our whānau order providers are trusted.
Meripeka Raukawa-Tate. It is 22 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. About 200 people remain cut off from the outside world days after flooding struck West Auckland. Te Hinga Bethel's beach was swamped with heavy rain on Tuesday, with landslides that are blocking parts of Te Hinga Road, while parts of Bethel's Road are washed out and impassable by vehicles. As Jean Bell reports, officials say there's no easy fix to the roading woes.
Bethel's Beach residents are settling into what feels like a lockdown within a lockdown. Leslie Gardner is the coordinator of Te Hinga Bethel's Beach Emergency Response Group. Her focus is on those who need the most help in the storm's aftermath.
Like any community, we've got a few vulnerable people. You know, there's someone in a wheelchair, someone who's having a baby, older people, you know, all sorts of things. So just making sure that everybody is in contact with somebody.
People were already prepared to bunker down due to the Alert Level 4 restrictions. But Ms Gardner says clearing and fixing the roads should be the number one priority.
Getting the road fixed is absolutely number one. You know, they need to do something temporary probably in the meantime while they figure out what to do, perhaps, because we can't get in or out at all unless there's an emergency. We are pretty stuck down here.
Waitakere Rangers local board member and Bethel's Beach resident Mark Allen thinks patching up the road will be no easy feat.
It's a big job. It's a lot of black sand that the whole area is built on.
With the Auckland region still under Alert Level 4 restrictions, he says residents are wearing masks and maintaining social distancing in the clean-up.
People are pretty good. We're all outside, so we're standing apart from each other, but and really minimising physical contact and hugs, etc., which was a little bit harder because we're a pretty good community and looking after each other.
Most people have enough kai and supplies to see them through the next couple of days.
People have already stocked up with food, so it'll start to kick in the next couple of days if we don't have good access.
Mark Allen says all but one family is back in their homes following the wild weather. An Auckland Transport spokesperson says there's no quick and easy fix for Bethel's Road, which is not safe for use in its current state. Contractors have visited the site, and options for getting temporary access through private land nearby is being explored. Reese Knight's family is among those who evacuated on Tuesday morning. They're now back in their home and are focusing on doing some more relaxing activities.
So we've got somebody cooking us some essentials, including butter, so we can do some baking. There's a bit of that. But yeah, we've got all we need. We've always pretty well set up. You can make bread or get your sourdough done today.
Reese Knight says the community has been pitching in and helping each other out, whether that's collecting groceries or with the debris clean-up.
In breaking news, an update on the infected man who allegedly broke out of quarantine. RNZ understands after the man tested positive, he was first required to isolate at his home, but he allegedly left the residence at some point yesterday. It's understood the police were alerted, and once he returned to the house, was taken by police to the quarantine hotel and formally processed. And at some point after that, police say he escaped from the Ellerslie Hotel. A team of South Auckland locals are wasting no time in lockdown, working daily to get food and essentials to whānau in need. They've been out and about dropping off food, hygiene products and even the odd birthday cake. Our reporter Katie Doyle made a physically distanced visit to their Otara headquarters to meet the team.
When the going gets tough, the Otara community gets going. That's where we are today, masked up and meeting the team working to ensure no whānau goes without. One of them is Te Rangi Parima from the Community Builders Trust and the Otara Kai Village.
This is super important because we know the need is there. And a lot of us are, all of us are from the community. We've been born and raised in Otara.
So we know that the struggle is real outside of lockdown, and inside of lockdown it becomes even more.
Food parcels are in high demand at the moment, with some whānau facing job losses and a number of elderly scared to leave the house. Solar showers have been distributed to the homeless, who normally rely on the free local pool facilities.
So included in the hygiene packs are the solar showers, we've got some shampoo and conditioner, we've got some body wash, we've got a towel, a face cloth, as well as some toothbrushes and toothpaste.
But this operation is about more than providing the basic necessities. It's about making sure whānau get a little joy. Bags dubbed parent sanity packs are filled to the brim with sweet treats for mums and dads stuck at home.
And then we've got a deck of cards in each pack as well. So the idea around that was to get families active within the home. So obviously, like just playing cards, having that family time.
One of the team, Tash Teorema, says birthday cakes are being delivered too.
We just want to give a bit of hope and just to cheer them up for, 3 weeks, I believe now, of lockdown. So we just want to, just pick them up really.
And if that wasn't enough, the team's also active on social media, connecting with whānau in the community. Swanee Nelson says it's about getting creative while checking in.
So if you look at one of the last recent live feeds that we've done, which is a digital scavenger hunt, people loved to engage and they were getting a really awesome treat, but at the same time it opened up a platform for us to actually say, how are you?
Central to it all is mana enhancement, especially for whānau feeling whakamā, shy, about asking for help.
We make sure we create fun around the environment, how we approach it, so it doesn't feel like a transactional, here is this and I'll take that kind of thing, but that it's kind of like, this is just how we are, we look after one another. In Māori, we call it manaakitanga, and so that manaaki is exuberated through the way that we do things.
Despite the hard work done by this team and all the other frontline groups in Auckland, there is still a lot of need. Ms Nelson says laptops for students are in short supply right now and the team are frantically searching for donations.
The digital inequality that exists here and that we're needing support actually because we've already exhausted the very small amount of devices that we had on standby.
As Harmony Siaia says, it's Otara supporting Otara.
We're people who have grown up in this community, we're people who are born and bred in this community. We've been through some of the struggles that our people are going through right now, and so we understand the need that's out there, especially in South Auckland.
The lockdown has been intense and the demand is huge, but the team here are determined to make a dent.
And before we head off, your feedback on superannuation. A lot of people saying it's not a benefit. Well, I don't know. What's the problem with calling it a benefit? It is a universal benefit, isn't it? It comes under the MSD department and the Social Development Minister, and it's a payment from the state to an individual. That makes it a benefit, doesn't it? Anyway, tomorrow on First Up from 5, ko te kaupapa tuatahi o Pōpō, they will be live in Ahipara in Kerikeri as Northland opens it up for level 3 businesses. Back tomorrow.
Kia ora tātou. RNZ News headlines, ko Sarah Thompson tōku ingoa. RNZ understands a man who escaped from quarantine this morning was first required to isolate at home, but left yesterday, and police then took him to the Ellerslie MIQ hotel. He has been charged with breaching public health orders. There are 49 new COVID-19 cases today, all in Auckland, which will be the only region to remain at level 4 after midnight. 2 people who returned to this country on Mercy flights out of Afghanistan have tested positive for COVID-19. Nearly 7,800 superannuitants earn more than $200,000 a year, triple the figure a decade ago. Those are your headlines. Our next news update is at 7.
Country Life this week meets the kids of remote Makuri School.
My name's Rosie. Nathan and William.
They're not only zooming round the playground, but also zooming online.
Elizabeth, Morena, how are you doing?
Good.
Good, right?
Virtual classrooms mean more friends, more teachers and more opportunities.
This will be my first one today at 1 o'clock.
Are you excited about it?
Yes, and very nervous.
E-learning for rural kids. Country Life, Friday at 9 during nights and Saturday morning after the 7 o'clock news on RNZ National.
Thanks, Sally. And that's tomorrow night on Nights. Tonight on Nights, my first guest after the news at 7. I'm Brian Crump, by the way, getting ready for another evening with you. My first guest is Bill Jarr. He is a McDiarmid Institute doctoral researcher, and he's going to talk about Corrodium, which was a plot driver in a cartoon series popular with kids that are a bit older than my son, but a bit younger than me, called Ben 10. Turns you mutant. And so he's going to be talking a lot about radioactive materials that could be like corrodium, because corrodium doesn't exist in the real world, but there are real-life equivalents to it, although maybe not as fast-acting as corrodium in terms of mutations. That's coming up after the news. In this half hour, well, we've got our latest report from the team at the House. And first off, some audio that's been doing well on the website in terms of getting lots of clicks. Well, one of the things about lockdown is it's a chance for you to do some DIY. And one New Zealander has been showing the world how to. Scott Brown's carpentry videos have been popular in New Zealand, but also all over the planet. His YouTube channel is a family affair with Scott's partner, Jessica Bell, lending her creativity to the tutorials. It's got 280,000 subscribers, more than 50,000 Instagram followers. In the videos, you can find Scott tackling tasks such as hanging a door, replacing house piles, or building a floating shelf. One of the most popular, apparently. Scott and Jessica joined 9 to noon, and they were asked how they began making this DIY content.
Well, while we were traveling, I kind of did Snapchat stories every day, and they were a little bit extra. Like I would put all this music in there, all these segments, and like cooking segments and all sorts of things. And then because of Snapchat, 24 hours later, it's all gone. So eventually I was watching YouTubers and I was like, I reckon I could do what I'm doing on Snapchat over on YouTube. And a lot of other YouTubers were inspiring me. And then I started doing that.
Yeah, and at that time, this was around the time I lived in Scotland 5 years ago, we were starting to watch a lot of YouTubers ourselves. And like YouTubers, and it was still quite a funny concept, the idea that just a normal person would pick up a camera and film themselves. But as we got more and more into it, I think Scott started thinking, why don't I do this? Yeah.
The good old why not question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I encouraged him.
Yeah.
So I was a bit scared when he said, I'm going to spend all the very small amount of money we have left after travelling on a fancy camera. And I said, okay, that's cool.
Yeah,
but
we were in the queue at JB Hi-Fi. She pointed to me and goes, you better use this. you better do this channel. Like, don't waste $2,000 on nothing.
Well, you've proven me, well, you've done me very proud.
Yeah.
So you probably were just landing at the right time, really, because YouTube, of course, is the go-to for, entire generations now, entire demographics, although it's quite interesting, the mix of demographics, but it is just so mainstream as a source of media content now. And at the time you were doing this, 5 years ago, were you just sort of on the cusp of that, or just beginning to catch that wave really becoming as popular as it has been?
Yeah. It was about just over 3 years ago. I don't know.